The morning I found the cease and desist letter taped to my front door. I was holding a cup of coffee and watching dragonflies skim across my koi pond, their iridescent wings catching the early sunlight like tiny helicopters patrolling the water's surface. My name is Trevor Douglas, and I had spent 3 months building that pond in my backyard in Riverside, California. It was not just a hobby project. It was therapy after my divorce, a place where I could sit and watch the orange and white koi glide through the water like living brushstrokes. The sound of the small waterfall I had installed masked the noise from the highway half a mile away, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had created something meaningful. The letter was from the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, and it was signed by Patricia Hendricks, the HOA president. I recognized her name immediately because she had already sent me 2 warnings about my lawn being a 1/4 inch too high and my trash cans being visible from the street for more than 12 hours. This woman had made it her life's mission to ensure that every house in our subdivision looked like it came from the same catalog. I unfolded the letter and read it while standing on my front porch, my coffee growing cold in my hand. Dear Mr. Douglas, it has come to our attention that you have constructed an unauthorized water feature on your property without prior approval from the HOA Architectural Review Committee. Multiple neighbors have complained that this pond attracts pests, including mosquitoes, rodents, and other vermin. This constitutes a violation of Meadowbrook Estates CC&R Section 4.7, which prohibits any modifications that create health hazards or nuisances. You have 14 days to remove the pond and restore your backyard to its original condition, or face daily fines of $500 until compliance is achieved. I read it 3 times, each time feeling my blood pressure rise. Pests. My pond was the reason I had stopped getting mosquito bites when I sat outside. The dragonfly larvae in the water ate mosquito larvae like popcorn. The adult dragonflies patrolled my yard like tiny fighter jets. I had not seen a single mosquito near my property since the pond ecosystem had established itself. I walked around to my backyard and stood at the edge of the pond. The water was crystal clear, thanks to the filtration system I had installed. 7 koi fish, ranging from 6 inches to nearly a foot long, swam in lazy circles. Water lilies floated on the surface, their pink and white flowers just starting to open. A green heron had visited twice last week, and I had seen it snatch up a bullfrog tadpole. My neighbor to the left, Marcus, leaned over the fence. He was a software engineer who worked from home and often came outside to vape between meetings. "Got the letter too, huh?" he said. "You got one?" I asked. "No, but I saw Patricia taping them to doors this morning." She had that look on her face. "You know the one." I knew exactly what he meant. Patricia Hendricks had perfected the expression of someone who had found a purpose in life, and that purpose was making everyone else miserable. She was probably in her late 40s, with blonde hair cut in a style that demanded to speak to managers everywhere she went. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a bumper sticker that said, "My child is an honor student at Riverside Academy." "Did anyone actually complain about my pond?" I asked Marcus. He shook his head. "Not that I know of. I love it, actually. My backyard used to be swarming with mosquitoes. Now, nothing. I can actually use my patio." "That's what I thought," I said. "This is insane." Marcus took a long drag from his vape pen. "Welcome to Meadowbrook Estates, where Karen reigns supreme and logic goes to die." I went back inside and pulled out my copy of the CC and Artiques, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that governed our neighborhood. I had read through them when I bought the house 2 years ago, but I had forgotten most of the details. The document was 63 pages of dense legal language that seemed designed to prevent residents from doing anything that might indicate they actually lived in their homes. Section 4.7 did mention that modifications creating health hazards required approval. But it also said that the Architectural Review Committee had to respond to requests within 30 days and could only deny requests for specific, documented reasons. I had never submitted a request because I honestly had not thought a pond in my fenced backyard would be an issue. The CC and Articus also mentioned that water features under 200 gallons did not require approval. My pond was 180 gallons. I had specifically designed it that way. I took pictures of the pond from multiple angles, making sure to capture the clear water, the healthy fish, and the dragonflies hovering above the surface. Then I sat down at my computer and drafted a response letter. Dear Miss Hendricks, I received your cease and desist letter dated May 15, 2025. I respectfully disagree with your characterization of my koi pond as a health hazard or pest attractor. The pond is 180 gallons, which falls under the threshold requiring architectural approval per CC and R Section 4.7b. Furthermore, the pond has significantly reduced mosquito populations in my yard and neighboring properties by supporting dragonfly larvae, which are natural mosquito predators. I am happy to provide documentation from the Riverside County Vector Control District supporting this claim. The pond is well maintained, properly filtered, and poses no health or safety risks. I request that you provide specific documentation of the neighbor complaints you referenced, as well as evidence of any health hazards the pond has created. I look forward to resolving this matter quickly and professionally. I printed the letter, signed it, and walked 3 houses down to Patricia's residence. Her house was immaculate, with a lawn that looked like it had been trimmed with scissors and flower beds arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Her white Lexus sat in the driveway, freshly washed and gleaming. I rang the doorbell. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I saw a shape approach. Patricia opened the door and looked at me with the expression of someone who had just discovered gum on their shoe. Mr. Douglas, she said, not as a greeting but as an accusation, Miss Hendricks, I wanted to respond to your letter in person. I held out my printed response. She took it without looking at it. The letter was quite clear. You have 14 days. The pond is under the size requiring approval, I said, keeping my voice level. And it is actually preventing mosquitoes, not attracting them. Multiple neighbors have complained, she said, using the same tone she might use to discuss a sewage leak. Which neighbors? I asked. I would like to address their concerns directly. That information is confidential. How can I resolve a complaint if I do not know who made it or what their specific concerns are? Patricia's mouth formed a thin line. Mr. Douglas, I do not appreciate your tone. The HOA has rules for a reason. Your pond is an unapproved modification. That is the bottom line. You can appeal to the board at next month's meeting if you wish, but the fines will continue to accrue if you do not comply. Next month's meeting. Your letter said I have 14 days, correct? The meeting is in 6 weeks. You should have thought about this before you built an unauthorized water feature. She started to close the door. Wait, I said. Can I at least see the complaints? Goodbye, Mr. Douglas. The door shut with a decisive click. I stood on her porch for a moment, staring at the wreath of fake flowers hanging on her door. Then I walked back home, pulled out my phone, and called the Riverside County Vector Control District. The woman who answered was friendly and helpful. Her name was Linda, and she sounded genuinely interested when I explained my situation. Oh yes, Koi ponds are excellent for mosquito control, she said. The fish eat the larvae, and if you have dragonfly nymphs, they are even more effective. We actually recommend properly maintained ponds as part of integrated pest management. Can you put that in writing? I asked. Absolutely. Give me your email address, and I will send you some documentation. We have informational PDFs, and I can write a brief letter confirming that maintained koi ponds reduce mosquito populations rather than supporting them. That would be incredibly helpful. Thank you. No problem. Good luck with your HOA. We get calls about this kind of thing more often than you would think. The documentation arrived in my inbox within an hour. Linda had sent me 3 PDFs from the district about backyard mosquito control, and a signed letter on official letterhead stating that properly maintained koi ponds with fish and dragonfly larvae provided significant mosquito control benefits. I forwarded everything to Patricia's email address, which was listed on the HOA website, along with a polite message requesting that the board reconsider their position based on this professional documentation. Her response came back in less than 5 minutes. Mr. Douglas, the issue is not limited to mosquitoes. The pond attracts rodents and other pests. Additionally, your failure to seek pre-approval is a separate violation. The cease and desist order stands. You now have 13 days remaining. I stared at the email. Rodents? What rodents? I had never seen a rat or mouse anywhere near my pond. The only wildlife I had observed were birds, frogs, dragonflies, and once a garter snake that had been hunting the frogs. That evening, I knocked on doors up and down my street. Out of the 12 nearest neighbors, I talked to 9. Every single one of them said they had not complained about my pond. 3 of them specifically mentioned that they had noticed fewer mosquitoes since I built it. Mrs. Chen, who lived directly behind me, said her grandson loved watching the koi when he visited. Patricia is just power hungry, Mrs. Chen said, standing in her doorway with her arms crossed. Last year she tried to find me because my roses grew over my fence line by 2 inches. 2 inches. I had to threaten to sue before she backed down. I thanked her and continued my canvassing. By the time I finished, I was certain that no one had actually complained. Patricia had either fabricated the complaints or decided on her own that the pond was a problem. The next morning, I called an attorney. His name was Robert Griffin, and he specialized in HOA disputes. His website said he had handled over 200 cases and had an 87% success rate. "Tell me what's going on," he said when I reached him on the phone. I explained the situation, the cease and desist letter, the threats of fines, Patricia's refusal to provide evidence of complaints, and the documentation I had gathered from vector control. Robert listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "How much did your pond cost to build?" he asked. "About $4,000. That includes the materials, the filtration system, the fish, and the plants." "And how much would it cost to remove?" "Probably another 1,000 or more, plus I would lose everything I have invested in it." "Here's what I am thinking," Robert said. "The HOA is on shaky ground. If the pond is under the size threshold requiring approval, and if it is actually providing a benefit rather than creating a nuisance, they do not have much of a case. But HOAs can be stubborn. They will sometimes spend thousands in legal fees just to prove a point, even if they are wrong. So what do I do? First, do not remove the pond. Second, document everything. Take pictures, keep records of your conversations, save every email. Third, file a formal appeal with the board. Make them respond in writing. Fourth, if they deny your appeal and start issuing fines, we will file a lawsuit. We can seek an injunction preventing them from enforcing the fines while we litigate the underlying issue. How much will that cost? My retainer is $2,000. If it goes to trial, you are looking at $10,000 to $20,000 total. But most of these cases settle once the HOA realizes they do not have a solid legal position. And if we win, we can seek to recover your attorney fees from the HOA. I agreed to think about it and get back to him. $2,000 just to start fighting this felt insane, but so did spending $1,000 to destroy something I had built with my own hands. That afternoon, I was working in my home office when I heard a knock on my door. I opened it to find a man in his 60s wearing khaki pants and a polo shirt. He had a friendly face and was holding a clipboard. "Mr. Douglas, I am Gary from Eco-Safe Pest Control. I am here to inspect your property." "I did not call a pest control company," I said. "The HOA contracted us to conduct an inspection. Miss Hendricks said you have a water feature that may be harboring pests." I felt my jaw tighten. "She did not tell me she was sending anyone." Gary shrugged apologetically. "I am just doing my job, sir." "If you refuse the inspection, I will have to note that in my report, and I imagine the HOA will not be happy about it." I stepped aside. "Fine, come in." Gary was thorough and professional. He walked through my house, checked the kitchen, bathrooms, garage, and attic. Then we went into the backyard. He spent 15 minutes examining the pond, the surrounding plants, and the fence line. He got down on his hands and knees to look under my deck. He poked around in the bushes with a flashlight. Finally, he stood up, brushed off his knees, and made some notes on his clipboard. "What's the verdict?" I asked. Gary looked at me and smiled. "Mr. Douglas, I have been doing pest control for 32 years. Your property is one of the cleanest I have seen. No rodent droppings, no evidence of nesting, no standing water except for the pond, which is clearly well maintained. The pond itself is supporting dragonflies, which means it is actively reducing mosquito populations. Honestly, whatever you are doing, keep doing it." "Can you put that in your report?" "Absolutely. I always report exactly what I find, not what people want me to find." He tore off a carbon copy of his inspection form and handed it to me. Under the section labeled Evidence of Pest Activity, he had written none. Property well maintained. Koi pond supports beneficial insects and reduces mosquito habitat. I could have hugged him. "Thank you. Seriously, thank you." "No problem. I will send my full report to the HOA by tomorrow. Good luck with all this." After Gary left, I scanned the inspection form and emailed it to Patricia with another polite request to withdraw the cease and desist order. Her response was almost immediate. "The pest control inspection does not address the issue of your failure to obtain pre-approval. You now have 11 days to comply." I called Robert Griffin and hired him on the spot. Over the next week, Robert drafted a formal appeal to the HOA board. The appeal was 8 pages long and included photographs of the pond, the documentation from Riverside County Vector Control, the pest control inspection report, and signed statements from 5 neighbors attesting that they had not complained about the pond and had noticed a reduction in mosquitoes since its installation. The appeal also pointed out that the pond was under the size threshold requiring approval, and that the CC and Articus required the HOA to demonstrate actual harm or violation of specific rules before imposing fines. Robert concluded by noting that the HOA's actions appeared to be arbitrary and potentially discriminatory, and that continued threats of fines could constitute harassment. We hand-delivered the appeal to Patricia's house and sent copies to the other 4 members of the HOA board. According to the CC and Articus, the board had to schedule a hearing within 30 days. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. The letter stated that my appeal had been received, but that the cease and desist order remained in effect pending the hearing. It also noted that fines would begin accruing if I did not comply by the deadline, which was now 6 days away. "They are trying to force you to blink first," Robert said when I called him. "They want you to remove the pond before the hearing so the whole issue becomes moot." "I am not removing it," I said. "Good. Let them fine you. We will add that to the lawsuit." The deadline came and went. I did not remove the pond. I went to work at my job as a civil engineer, came home, fed my fish, and sat on my patio watching dragonflies while I ate dinner. It was peaceful and satisfying, which made the whole situation even more absurd. A week later, I received another certified letter. The HOA was fining me $500 per day, starting from the date the deadline had passed. The total was already $3,500, and it was increasing by $500 every 24 hours. Robert filed a lawsuit in Riverside County Superior Court the next day. The complaint requested a temporary restraining order preventing the HOA from collecting fines, a declaration that the pond complied with the CC and articles, and an award of attorney fees and costs. The complaint also hinted at potential claims for harassment and breach of the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing. The temporary restraining order hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, the fines kept accumulating. The HOA sent me a statement every week. By the time of the hearing, the total was over $10,000. The morning of the hearing, I put on a suit and met Robert at the courthouse. It was a brutally hot June day in Riverside, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the asphalt. Inside, the courtroom was mercifully air-conditioned. Patricia was there with the HOA's attorney, a man named James Kellerman who looked like he charged $400 an hour and enjoyed every minute of it. Patricia wore a navy blue pantsuit and had her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked at me like I was a cockroach that had somehow learned to wear clothing. Judge Rachel Martinez presided. She was in her 50s, with short gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. She had a reputation for being no-nonsense and efficient. "Let's get started," Judge Martinez said. "Mr. Griffin, this is your motion. Go ahead." Robert stood and delivered a concise summary of the situation. He emphasized that the pond was under the size threshold requiring approval, that it provided environmental benefits, and that the HOA had failed to demonstrate any actual harm. He introduced the evidence we had gathered, the vector control documentation, the pest control inspection, the neighbor statements. Judge Martinez looked at the documents and asked a few clarifying questions. Then she turned to James Kellerman. "Mr. Kellerman, what's the HOA's position?" Kellerman stood. He had the smooth, practiced demeanor of an attorney who had done this many times before. "Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about rule compliance, not about the merits of Mr. Douglas's pond. The CC and articles clearly state that any modification to a property must receive pre-approval from the Architectural Review Committee. Mr. Douglas did not seek such approval. That is a violation, regardless of whether the pond is beneficial or harmful. But the CC and articles also state that water features under 200 gallons do not require approval," Robert interjected. "Mr. Douglas's pond is 180 gallons. We dispute that measurement," Kellerman said smoothly. "Our engineer estimates the pond at approximately 230 gallons. Based on what?" Judge Martinez asked. "Visual inspection and standard calculations, Your Honor." Robert shook his head. "I have the actual specifications, Your Honor." The pond is 6 feet by 4 feet with an average depth of 14 inches. That is 180 gallons. This is basic math. Judge Martinez looked at Patricia. Miss Hendricks, did you or anyone from the HOA actually measure the pond? Patricia stood. We relied on our engineer's professional opinion, Your Honor. So you did not measure it? No, Your Honor, but it is quite clearly over the threshold. I see. Judge Martinez made a note. What about the claims that the pond attracts pests? Kellerman pulled out a folder. We have received multiple complaints from neighbors, Your Honor. Can you provide those complaints? They were submitted verbally to Miss Hendricks. So there is no written record. Not at this time, Your Honor. Judge Martinez looked unimpressed. Mr. Griffin has submitted statements from 5 neighbors saying they did not complain, and that the pond has actually reduced mosquito problems. Do you have any evidence contradicting that? Kellerman hesitated. The issue, Your Honor, is not whether, answer the question, Mr. Kellerman. Do you have any evidence that the pond is actually creating a pest problem? We have concerns about potential issues, Your Honor. Potential issues are not the same as actual issues, counsel. Judge Martinez leaned back in her chair. Here is what I am seeing. Mr. Douglas built a pond that appears to comply with the size requirements in the CC and Articus. He has presented credible evidence that the pond provides environmental benefits and does not create the problems the HOA claims. The HOA, on the other hand, has not measured the pond, has no documented complaints, and has no evidence of actual harm. This looks to me like arbitrary enforcement. Patricia stood up. Your Honor, if I may, you may not, Miss Hendricks. Sit down. Judge Martinez's tone was sharp. Patricia sat. I am granting the temporary restraining order, Judge Martinez continued. The HOA is enjoined from collecting or attempting to collect the fines against Mr. Douglas pending a full hearing on the merits. Furthermore, I am ordering the HOA to conduct an actual measurement of the pond within 7 days and to provide any documented evidence of neighbor complaints or pest problems within the same time frame. We will reconvene in 30 days for a full hearing. If the HOA cannot provide evidence supporting its position, I will make the injunction permanent and consider awarding attorney fees to Mr. Douglas. Kellerman started to object, but Judge Martinez cut him off. That is my ruling, counsel. See you in 30 days. Outside the courthouse, Robert clapped me on the shoulder. That went about as well as it could have. Do you think they will drop it? I asked. I think they should, but HOAs are not always rational actors. Patricia seems personally invested in this. She might push the board to keep fighting even if it is a losing battle. He was right. 2 weeks later, we received the HOA's response to the judge's order. An engineer had measured the pond and confirmed it was 182 gallons, just barely over my estimate, but still under the 200-gallon threshold. However, the HOA's response argued that the threshold only applied to decorative water features and that my koi pond qualified as a livestock enclosure because it contained fish. They are grasping at straws, Robert said when I called him. This is ridiculous. The full hearing was held on a sweltering Friday in July. This time, Judge Martinez looked annoyed before the hearing even started. Kellerman presented the livestock enclosure argument with as much conviction as he could muster, but it was clear from Judge Martinez's expression that she was not buying it. Mr. Kellerman, are you seriously arguing that 6 koi fish constitute livestock? The CC and Articus do not define livestock, Your Honor. We believe the term should be interpreted broadly to include any non-native animals kept for non-utilitarian purposes. That is absurd, Robert said. By that logic, A goldfish bowl would be a livestock enclosure. The CC and Articus clearly distinguish between decorative water features and agricultural operations. Mr. Douglas is not running a fish farm. Judge Martinez agreed. She issued a ruling from the bench, making the injunction permanent and ordering the HOA to cease all enforcement actions related to the pond. She also awarded attorney fees to me in the amount of $8,000 to be paid by the HOA. Furthermore, Judge Martinez said, looking directly at Patricia, I am concerned about the HOA's conduct in this matter. It appears that enforcement was initiated without proper investigation or evidence, and that the HOA pursued this matter even after it became clear that Mr. Douglas was in compliance with the CC and Articus. I am ordering the HOA to conduct training for its board members on proper enforcement procedures and residents' rights. A report on that training shall be filed with this court within 90 days. Patricia's face was bright red. She whispered something to Kellerman, who shook his head. We left the courthouse victorious but exhausted. The whole process had taken 3 months and had been unbelievably stressful. Congratulations, Robert said. You won. Thanks, I said. I just want to go home and feed my fish. I thought the matter was over. I was wrong. A week after the court ruling, I came home from work to find my koi pond destroyed. The liner had been slashed in multiple places. The water had drained into my yard, turning the grass into a muddy swamp. The fish were gone. The plants were scattered across the lawn, wilting in the sun. The filtration system had been smashed with what looked like a sledgehammer. I stood in my backyard, staring at the destruction, feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. I had raised those fish from fingerlings. I had spent months balancing the ecosystem, and now it was just gone. I called the police. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. They took pictures, asked questions, and filled out a report. One of them, Officer Ramirez, seemed genuinely sympathetic. You have any idea who did this? She asked. I have a pretty good idea, I said, and I told her about the HOA dispute and the court ruling. Officer Ramirez exchanged a glance with her partner. We will follow up. Do you have any security cameras? I did not. I had never felt the need for them in what I thought was a safe neighborhood. Your neighbors might have footage, Officer Ramirez suggested. Ring doorbells, that kind of thing. You should ask around. I spent the next 2 hours knocking on doors. Mrs. Chen did not have cameras, but Marcus did. He had installed a ring system 6 months ago after someone stole a package from his porch. Let me check the footage, he said. We went inside and pulled up the app on his phone. His camera faced the street, but it had a wide angle that captured part of my driveway. We scrubbed through the footage from earlier that day. At 2:47 p.m., a white Lexus SUV pulled into my driveway. Patricia got out, looked around, and walked into my backyard through the side gate. Holy shit, Marcus said. Patricia was in my yard for 18 minutes. When she came back into view, she was carrying a sledgehammer and breathing hard. She put the sledgehammer in her trunk, got in her car, and drove away. I am sending this to you right now, Marcus said. He was already uploading the video. I forwarded the footage to Officer Ramirez within minutes. She called me back an hour later. We are issuing an arrest warrant for Patricia Hendricks. We will pick her up tonight. This is criminal mischief, trespassing, and possibly malicious destruction of property. The DA will decide what charges to file. Thank you, I said, my voice shaking. I was not shaking from fear. I was shaking from anger. Patricia was arrested at her home that evening. According to Marcus, who watched from his window, she tried to argue with the officers and demanded to speak to their supervisor. They handcuffed her and put her in the back of a patrol car while her teenage son watched from the doorway, crying. I felt a tiny flicker of sympathy for the kid, but it was hard to feel too bad when I was standing in my destroyed backyard, scooping up mud where my koi pond used to be. The next day, the local news picked up the story. HOA president arrested for destroying neighbor's koi pond was the headline on the Riverside Press Enterprise website. The article included details about the court case and the video footage. It went viral on social media. People love stories about insane HOA drama, and this one had everything: petty tyranny, a sympathetic victim, environmental destruction, and a criminal arrest. Patricia made bail and immediately resigned from the HOA board. The other board members issued a public apology and announced that they were reviewing all of the HOA's enforcement policies. They also offered to reimburse me for the cost of rebuilding the pond, but I did not want their money. I wanted justice. The district attorney charged Patricia with felony vandalism, trespassing, and malicious destruction of property. The total value of the damage was estimated at over $6,000, which pushed it into felony territory. Robert helped me file a civil lawsuit as well, seeking damages for the cost of rebuilding the pond, emotional distress, and punitive damages. The civil case would proceed regardless of the outcome of the criminal case. Patricia's criminal trial was held in October. I testified about finding the destroyed pond, about the video footage, and about the HOA dispute that had preceded the vandalism. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours and found her guilty on all counts. Judge Thomas Brennan, who presided over the criminal trial, did not mince words during sentencing. "Miss Hendricks, you held a position of trust and authority in your community. Instead of using that position responsibly, you abused it. When the legal system ruled against you, you took matters into your own hands in the most destructive way possible. You trespassed onto your neighbor's property and destroyed something he had built with his own hands, something that was providing environmental benefits to the community. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment. This was calculated, vindictive, and cruel." He sentenced her to 2 years in county jail, with the possibility of work release after 6 months, and ordered her to pay full restitution for the damages. He also placed her on probation for 3 years after her release, with conditions including anger management classes and community service. Patricia's attorney asked for a reduced sentence, arguing that she had no prior criminal record and was a respected member of the community. Judge Brennan was unmoved. "Being a respected member of the community makes this worse, not better. You should have known better." The civil case settled 3 months later. Patricia's homeowner's insurance paid me $40,000, which covered the cost of rebuilding the pond, replacing the fish and plants, and compensated me for the emotional distress of coming home to find my property destroyed. Robert took his cut, and I was left with enough to rebuild the pond twice over. I did rebuild it, and I made it better. I expanded it to 190 gallons, still safely under the threshold. I installed a security camera system that covered every angle of my backyard. I bought new koi, including a beautiful platinum agon that cost $300 but was worth every penny. I replanted the water lilies and added some lotus flowers. By the following spring, the pond was thriving again. The dragonflies returned. A pair of bullfrogs took up residence and serenaded me every evening. Mrs. Chen's grandson came over to feed the fish whenever he visited. The HOA, now under new leadership, left me alone. The new president was a retired teacher named Dorothy, who actually seemed to care about building community rather than enforcing arbitrary rules. She organized a neighborhood barbecue and personally apologized to me for everything that had happened. What Patricia did was unconscionable, Dorothy said. I hope you can forgive the rest of us for not standing up to her sooner. I accepted her apology. It was not the fault of the other board members that Patricia had been a tyrant. Most of them had been too intimidated by her to push back. Marcus and I became good friends. We started having weekly barbecues in my backyard, sitting by the pond and drinking beer while the sun set. Other neighbors joined us. The pond became a gathering place, a center of community in a way I had never anticipated when I started digging the hole in my backyard. One evening in late spring, almost a year after Patricia's arrest, I was sitting by the pond with Marcus and Mrs. Chen, watching the koi swim in lazy circles. The water was perfectly clear and the sound of the waterfall was soothing. A dragonfly landed on my knee, its wings shimmering in the fading light. You know, Mrs. Chen said, I have not been bitten by a mosquito in over a year, not once. Same, Marcus said. My wife keeps asking if I am using some kind of secret bug spray. I smiled. It is not secret. It is just the pond doing what ponds do. Patricia was wrong about everything, Mrs. Chen said. The pond does not attract pests. It eliminates them. Some people do not want to admit when they are wrong, Marcus said. They would rather burn everything down than say they made a mistake. I thought about Patricia, sitting in county jail, serving time for destroying something beautiful out of spite. I wondered if she had learned anything from the experience, or if she was just bitter and resentful. I hoped for her sake that she had found some perspective, but mostly I did not think about her at all. I thought about my pond, my fish, my garden, and my neighbors. I thought about the dragonflies that patrolled my yard like tiny guardians, eating mosquitoes and making my life better without me even having to ask. To the pond, Marcus said, raising his beer. To the pond, Mrs. Chen and I echoed. We clinked bottles and drank while the sun set over Riverside, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The koi rose to the surface, their mouths opening expectantly. I sprinkled food across the water and watched them eat, their colors bright against the dark water. This was what I had wanted all along: peace, beauty, a place to sit and think and heal. The HOA had tried to take it away, but I had fought back. I had won. The dragonfly took off from my knee, hovering for a moment before darting away across the water. I watched it go, grateful for every small battle it fought, every mosquito it caught, every tiny contribution it made to the ecosystem I had created. In the end, that was what the pond had taught me. Everything is connected. Every action has consequences. Building something positive attracts positive things. Destroying something out of spite only destroys yourself. Patricia had learned that lesson the hard way. I had learned it too, in a different way. And now, sitting by my pond with my friends, watching the light fade and the stars come out, I felt like I finally understood what home was supposed to mean. It was not just a house. It was not just property. It was a place where you could create something beautiful and share it with others. A place where dragonflies danced and koi swam and neighbors became friends. A place worth fighting for. I fed the fish one more time, watching them swirl and dart through the water. Tomorrow I would go to work, come home, and do it all again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Building a life, one day at a time, in the home I had made my own. The pond rippled in the breeze, catching the moonlight. A bullfrog called from somewhere in the depths. Marcus told a joke that was not very funny, but we all laughed anyway. Mrs. Chen talked about her grandson's school play. I listened and smiled and felt, for the first time in a long time, completely at peace. The HOA had said my koi pond attracted pests. They were wrong. It eliminated mosquitoes and attracted friends. And in the end, that made all the difference.